Welcome back, friends. The fruit of the Spirit is faithfulness. Faithfulness. Let's see where that takes us this week. To get there, we're going to be starting in a gospel story from the Gospel according to Matthew, from the 14th chapter, verses 22 through 36. This may be a familiar story to you. Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "Look, it's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it's I. Don't be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you out on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And they got into the boat, and the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Holy Spirit will speak to us through these words in our minds and in our hearts. Let's think this through together. Frank was a member of a church I once served. He sat on the board of an enormous Catholic hospital nearby. Now, two things you need to know about this. Frank was kind of a big shot. He was one of those guys who sat on the boards of directors of a few international or transnational corporations. He was an Ivy League trained CPA, well respected by all his peers. Frank knew his numbers, right, left, backwards, forwards. The other thing you need to know is that hospitals have a tough time making ends meet, especially hospitals that are located in urban areas with sizable populations of poor folks who tend to have greater health needs and fewer financial resources. So when Frank sat at a board meeting and looked at a profit loss statement bathed in red ink, he felt it was his duty to tell the sisters who were in charge that, well, the prospects for the future of this hospital were pretty bleak. "You might make it past the end of this fiscal year," said Frank, "but not much longer than that." The sisters looked at him knowingly and a bit amused, to be honest, until one of them asked him to come to Jesus question. "Where's your faith? God will provide. Everything will work out." Frank said, "Everything might work out in general, sister, but not in this hospital." Every meeting since, these 12, 13, 14 years later, the sisters have been gracious enough not to say, "I told you so. I told you things would work out." Because Frank was dead right about the numbers, but the nuns were alive right about God. God did provide, and they kept the faith, and faith kept them focused on what matters most: God's faithfulness to a mission to serve the least of these. Their faith kept them focused on God's faithfulness. Have you been watching the Olympic Games? Well, I guess not everybody has, but we certainly have been. Every 4 years, I marvel at how 5 years this time, I marvel at how the gymnasts and divers especially, how they manage to keep their wits about them and perform things like 2.5 twist, triple back flips in a tuck position. I don't even understand what the announcers are saying. How do they keep their wits about them? How do they know which way is up? Especially when the fact is that if they get it wrong, they could be seriously injured. We found out this year that, well, they don't always stay oriented. We learned about a thing called the twisties. This weird feeling that their brains are doing one thing and their bodies are doing something else altogether. They end up getting split somehow. They lose their orientation. So, you know the story of Simone Biles, of course. You know, her brain and body took two different paths at the Olympics. My friend Frank got the twisties. His analytical mind went one way when his deep faith in God would have taken him another. And Peter in our story today, he tried to keep his eyes fixed on Jesus, who had called him to come. But at the same time, he looked around at the strong wind and he got freaked out and bloop, down he went. Meanwhile, faithfulness is one of those things that happens to you when God is at work in you. It's the fruit of the Spirit, is another way of putting it. Faithfulness has everything to do with singleness of purpose, with focus, with keeping your eye on the one ball. As in, when you get married, the minister or presiding officer asks you, forsaking every other, do you keep to this one only? Only? No exceptions? Faithfulness, as in, well, when you say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, you don't attach any clauses to that and say, well, unless it's inconvenient, or unless I don't like who the president is, or unless it's tax day. No. You focus. It's a matter of faith. Faithfulness is like those nuns who had left their families and all other possibilities for their lives behind them, turned away from the world and turned their faces wholly toward God and toward God's people. This is what the Holy Spirit does inside of us. Takes away the distractions, clarifies matters, cuts out the flack, and brings to our remembrance what Jesus said. And what did Jesus say? Come. Come. That's what he said to Peter. It's what Jesus said on a number of occasions. Let the little children come to me. That's what the kingdom of heaven looks like. Come. Follow me. I will make you fish for people. Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come. All is ready for you. You see, that's the gift of faithfulness. Is the gift of being able to hear that voice of Jesus no matter what else is going on. It's the ability to put aside what Jesus called in another parable, the cares of the world, and to hear the voice of Jesus. You see, faith isn't so much about subscribing to a list of propositions or teachings. It's not about repeating a set of doctrines over and over and over again. It's not about intellectual agreement with anything. Faith is all about single-minded, focused trust. Trust. It's about keeping relationship. It's focusing on the one thing that can keep your head above water while you're walking through the storm. Faith in God is hearing Jesus say, come, and focusing on that voice and answering, yes, here I am, Lord, let it be. The psychologist Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi identified a phenomenon called flow. Flow is that thing that happens when you get so involved in some challenging and fulfilling and fascinating task that you lose track of time, you lose track of where you are, you lose track of everything else in your life, and you focus completely on that thing. And when you've completed it, or maybe the amount of progress you want to, you feel more energy than you did when you started because it's energized you in the process. That's flow. The opposite is disorder. Entropy, it's divided attention. It's the opposite of flow, the opposite of faith is what Jesus used in the word doubt, which doesn't have to do with, I feel bad, I'm not sure about this, that, or the other thing. No, doubt is about going every which way all at once. It's divided mindedness. So this weekend, I want to urge you to be thankful for the gift of faithfulness, the gift of faith, the gift of flow, the gift of focus, the gift of hearing the crystal clear voice of Jesus calling you. The voice that helps you reorient yourself every day on His desire to have you near. Did you hear that? Helps you reorient yourself on Jesus' desire to have you near Him, to be by His side, to be His friend. When Peter talked to Jesus out there in the boat in the midst of the storm, he said, "Oh, talk to us if it's really you, Jesus." Jesus didn't say, "Well, all right, go over there." He said, "Come to me. Come here. I want you here." Be thankful for the gift of a sublime faithfulness. Sublime meaning the ability to rise above your current circumstances, to see from a higher perspective, and even as 100 distractions call you this way and that, be thankful for the faith that puts all else aside and asks, how is Jesus calling me right now? What is He inviting me to do right now? Whom is He calling me to love right now? Jesus says, come. You're busy? Come. Come. You got to take care of your family? Come. Come. You're burdened with anxiety? Come. Come. Focus. Listen to me. Come. No more twisties. No more divided mind. Come. Take my hand. Come to me. That's the word of faithfulness for this week. You may notice I'm wearing something very flashy this week because this is the week of a Hawaiian Shirt Week at United Reformed Church. People are going to wear flashy, maybe gaudy things to church on Sunday just because it's enjoyable to be together in God's house and enjoy one another's presence in that particular way. We'd love to have you with us this Sunday at 10 o'clock. I'm speaking about August 8th, 2021, in case you happen to hear this afterwards. But may grace and peace be with you. Next week, the fruit of the Spirit is gentleness. I'll see you then. So long.